Eala's unexpected appearance with Roger Federer at the 2026 Australian Open didn't just generate buzz. It rewrote the narrative of what women's tennis could look like in the years ahead. Two worlds converged in Melbourne that January. A living legend stepping back into the prominence he once owned. And a 20-year-old from the Philippines stepping into one she was still learning to transport. Nobody intended for their stories to intersect so profoundly that week. Nobody anticipated the images, the reactions, or the global conversation that would ensue. But tennis has always had a way of composing its own most dramatic chapters. And this one was just getting begun. Melbourne in January. For tennis enthusiasts, those three words alone bear the weight of history. The courts, the humidity, the electricity of the Australian Open, the tournament that Roger Federer himself once lovingly dubbed the Happy Slam. And in January 2026, Melbourne Park became the setting for a moment that nobody in the tennis world saw coming. Not like this. Not with this much passion behind it. Roger Federer was announced to headline the tournament's inaugural opening ceremony on January 17, 2026. The night before the primary draw started off, returning to Rod Laver Arena for the first time since 2020. The event was dubbed the Battle of the World Number-Ons. Alongside him were compatriot giants Andre Agassi, Leighton Hewitt, Patrick Rafter, and ultimately Ashley Barty. All sharing the court under the Melbourne lights for an entertaining exhibition doubles that had the sold-out audience on its feet. It was nostalgia, glamour, and pure tennis history all wrapped into one unforgettable event. But while the world was witnessing Federer's triumphant return, another story was discreetly building just a few courts away. Because arrival in Melbourne at exactly the same moment was Alexandra Eala, a 20-year-old Filipina rated world number 49 preparing for the greatest week of her immature life. The 2026 Australian Open would signify Eala's first ever main draw appearance at Melbourne Park. Two athletes decades apart in age and experience occupying the same stadium, the same breath, the same historic week. And the connection between them deeper than most people even realized. Think about this for a moment. Eala had been training at the Rafa Nadal Academy in Manacor, Mallorca since she was 13 years old. A program constructed by one half of the greatest rivalry in tennis history with Federer on the other side of that rivalry. While Federer represented the gold standard that Eala grew up observing, Nadal was the man who molded her daily as a competitor. The two legends were woven into her story from the very outset. And now here they both were in the same city in the same tournament at a crossroads of generations that the tennis world had never quite seen before. After capturing the US Open girls singles in 2022, a teenage Eala had spoken about Federer and Serena Williams retiring that same year, labeling them inspirations who had blazed a route for so many youthful tennis players. She said those remarks when she was 17. Now she was 20, standing on the same grounds where Federer had won 6 titles, preparing to confront her own moment under the brightest lights she had ever known. And none of this was a coincidence. This was tennis telling a narrative. Stay with us because what happened next in Melbourne that week was something even the most seasoned tennis observers couldn't have scripted. When Roger Federer enters into a room, something alters. You can view it in every countenance in the press corps, in every camera lens that arcs in his direction, in every query thrown at him that instantly bypasses the current players to concentrate entirely on him. That is the Federer effect. And Melbourne 2026 felt it immediately. At his pre-ceremony press conference, a visibly distraught Federer said, "I'm nervous. I'm excited. I'm pleased I'm here." He acknowledged, laughing slightly, that he hadn't done press conferences anymore. Confessing to the room a vulnerability that felt entirely human for someone of his stature. The chamber ate it up. Journalists who weren't even assigned to protect him showed up just to be in the same location. When asked about the future of tennis and rising talents, Federer offered a philosophy that resonated far beyond any one player. Speaking about young talents, he urged back on the notion of any player being content to be the third guy in the hierarchy. You don't want to be third gentleman. You want to be the guy, he said. That's hopefully what he's thinking. Anybody in the draw should come here and say, "I want to win the Australian Open." It should be completely allowed. Words aimed at the men's draw, but words that felt in the context of that week like they were speaking to an entire generation of young athletes on both excursions. Words that felt somehow like they were speaking to Eala, too. Because here was the connection that was transmitting social media into overdrive. While Federer and IA had no formal in-court interaction documented that week, The proximity of their stories, the timeliness, the setting, the theme overlap created something potent in the public imagination. One admirer put it simply on social media: "I trust Eala will reach Roger Federer's status of being the darling of the throng in the press." And that comment wasn't an eccentric opinion. It was a sentiment reverberating across millions of signals simultaneously. On the night of January 17th, Federer stepped onto Rod Laver Arena and greeted the crowd as if no time had elapsed at all. "I have missed you, and it is wonderful to be back. It's just where we left off. So many memories." The crowd erupted. Rod Laver himself was there for the coin toss. Novak Djokovic viewed courtside. And somewhere in that stadium, the spirit of everything tennis was intended to represent, elegance, pleasure, legacy, felt totally, perfectly alive. In that same week, the conversation connecting Federer to Eala was being amplified further by the media portrayal of both as symbols of the athletics' future, with Federer's trademark on running having sponsored rising male sensation Xiao Fonka, and Eala herself being described alongside Fonka as the new generation. And the sport was monitoring most closely. Two young players, two titans behind them, one tournament. The chatter was becoming impossible to disregard. Now, here is where the story truly takes your breath away. Because while Federer was getting his goodbye, Eala was having her beginning. And what a beginning it was! On January 19, 2026, Alexandra Eala strolled out to Court 6 at Melbourne Park for her first ever entree draw match at the Australian Open and discovered a scene that had never been seen before at that tournament. Hundreds of Filipino fans had filled every available seat. Hundreds more were turned away at the entrance. Even more watched on large TVs outside, waving Philippine flags, opinions already raised before a single ball had been struck. The 20-year-old had surged to world number 49 following a year that challenged every expectation. She had stunned Egviech, a 5-time Grand Slam champion, on her journey to the Miami Open semifinals in 2025. She had become the first athlete from the Philippines to win a Grand Slam main tie match at the US Open. She had done traits no Filipino in tennis history had ever done. And Melbourne knew it. Melbourne sensed it. The atmosphere inside Court 6 was described as football-like. Chants of "Let's go Alexandra" boomed out repeatedly. Philippine flags adorned every section of the stands. Roars arose even for inconsequential points. Her opponent, American Alicia Parks, later confessed she had never experienced anything like it. IA surged through the first set, winning it 6. A bagel, a complete domination, the crowd utterly electric. Parks confessed afterward, "I was just so concentrated on the crowd in the first set, which is why it went the way it went." For an instant, for one perfect first set, it felt like Eala was going to convey exactly the fairy tale her supporters had traveled thousands of miles to witness. And then the match turned. Parks studied herself, discovered her rhythm, served her way through 12 aces in the contest, and completed a stunning return. 0-6, 63, 62. Eala was hurried from the arena afterwards, surrounded by as many as a dozen security officers. The loss ached, but what followed the loss, that was something else entirely. "What is it?" Alex Eala said after that match, and what it revealed about who she truly is the part of this story you certainly cannot overlook. Defeat in sport. There is nothing quite as primal, nothing quite as revealing of character. You can acquire almost nothing about a person from witnessing them win. But observing them lose, that's where the real story resides. After the contest, Eala stayed on the court long after her opponent had departed, signing autographs for every single admirer who was still waiting. In her press conference, her voice carried the calm weight of someone contemplating something enormous. "It was so uplifting," she said. "That's one of the things that makes a tragedy like today a little bit harder. I know a number of people were rooting for me, but then again, Alicia played really well, and I just hope that the support endures with the losses along with the victories. I believe that would really affect me." Read those lines again. Not anger, not justifications, not deflection. Pure gratitude wrapped in the honest ache of someone who wanted to deliver for the persons who believed in her. A 20-year-old carrying the hopes of a nation on her shoulders and responding to heartbreak with grace that many veterans twice her age have never managed. She also acknowledged the overwhelming nature of the week itself. "I think this week was there were elements that were a bit overwhelming, especially during my practices. I didn't expect that many people to be there, so it's a learning process, like everything is part of the learning process. I'm still young 20, so I'm learning how to deal with all of this attention, but then at the same time being grateful. But here was the thread that ran through everything. The thread that connected her story to Federer's presence in Melbourne that same week. The tennis world was watching a player who, in the words of one commentator, had already become the most popular player in women's tennis despite being ranked 47th in the world and having just a handful of months on the main tour. Tony Nadal, the man who coached Rafael Nadal to 14 French Open titles, had already said of her, once she gets her game right, she could be among the best in the world. And Mats Wilander, one of the greatest analysts in tennis history, had declared, with Alexandra Eala, we're talking about someone who has hands given by God. These were not small compliments. These were seismic endorsements, and they were being spoken in the same week, in the same city where Roger Federer was being celebrated as perhaps the greatest who ever lived. The conversation about legacy, about who carries the sport forward, had never felt more alive. So, let's talk about the connection that actually sparked the global buzz. Because it wasn't just proximity, it wasn't just coincidence. There were threads connecting Alexia and Roger Federer that ran back years. And the moment Melbourne 2026 brought them into the same spotlight, those threads became impossible to ignore. In November 2025, just 2 months before the Australian Open, Eala had made headlines by hitting the practice court with Rafael Nadal himself, the individual who had mentored her since she was 13, who named her one of the brightest talents in women's tennis. Nadal had captioned the Instagram post, "1 year later, it felt wonderful to be back on a tennis court. It was wonderful to practice with you, Alexia. Next time, I will be stronger." That image of the retired 22-time Grand Slam champion choosing Eala as his first practice partner after a year absent from the court sent shock vibrations through the tennis community. Now, ponder about what that meant in the context of Melbourne 2026. Federer, Nadal's fiercest rival, the stranger on the other side of the most celebrated rivalry in tennis history, was returning to the sport's greatest stage at the precise same moment that Nadal's most prized pupil was making her Grand Slam debut. Media were already framing Eala and Fonka as Nadal's and Federer's selected ones, the young stars symbolically connected to the two foremost players of their generation. And then there was what Roger Federer had said publicly about inexperienced players having the audacity to imagine big. His philosophy that every participant in the draw should come in believing they can triumph, that no one should compromise for third location, felt almost tailor-made for the conversation around Eala. Here was a player who had strolled onto EGOT's court at the Miami Open and overcome her. Here was an athlete who had stepped onto the Grand Slam stage for the first time and created an atmosphere that appeared more like a World Cup than a tennis match. She was not thinking tiny. She was not settling for third. The commercial universe had noticed, too. Reports emerged of enormous sponsorship interest from global brands seeking to position Eala as a franchise athlete rather than a traditional endorsement figure. Comparing the vision behind her to what the same manufacturers had done with Michael Jordan, Roger Federer, and Serena Williams in their respective regimes. The mention of Federer's name in the same sentence as Eala's, not as a remote legend, but as a template, a travel map, was not lost on anyone paying heed. But here's the topic that nobody was inquiring out loud yet. And it's the one that alters everything about the story. Melbourne 2026 was about so much more than exhibition contests and first-round scores. It was about the passing of a torch in a sport that has never required new conflagration more urgently. Roger Federer's return reminded the world what tennis at its most graceful, most joyous, most human appears like. And Alexia's debut reminded the globe that the next chapter of the sport is already being written by a 20-year-old who signs signatures after losses, who deems overwhelming crowds a learning process, and who possesses an entire nation's affection onto a small outer court and makes it feel like the hub of the universe. The chatter wasn't just global, it was generational. And the tale is only just beginning. If this video moved you, if you believe Alexia is the future of women's tennis, drop a comment below. Tell us, is she the next Federer-level icon the sport has been waiting for? And if you want to follow every twist in this story as it unfolds, subscribe right now and press the chime, because this chapter, we are witnessing it happen in real time. Melbourne 2026 was about so much more than exhibition contests and first-round scores. It was about the passing of a torch in a sport that has never required new conflagration more urgently. Roger Federer's return reminded the world what tennis at its most graceful, most joyous, most human appears like. And Alex Aya's debut reminded the globe that the next chapter of the sport is already being written by a 20-year-old who signs signatures after losses, who deems overwhelming crowds a learning process, and who possesses an entire nation's affection onto a small outer court and makes it feel like the hub of the universe. The chatter wasn't just global, it was generational. And the tale is only just beginning. If this video moved you, if you believe Alex Aya is the future of women's tennis, remove a comment below. Tell us, is she the next Federer-level icon the sport has been looking for? And if you want to follow every twist in the story as it unfolds, subscribe right now and press the bell because this chapter we are witnessing it occurs in real.